Thank you, Heather. It's good to be here and to hear the interesting presentations today. One of the things I've made a bit of a practice of doing when invited to be a speaker is to come not just for the session you've been asked to do, but to get something a little bit beforehand so you don't make a complete fool of yourself. But before I start, of course, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners. And again, as I've said, thank you very much for the invitation. And so that you don't get too excited or too high expectations about what I'm going to do, I need to declare a couple of things. I said yes to doing this when I was on leave in the UK, so I think I was clear-headed when I said yes. But around our table we've got energetic young women, of course, and there are energetic young women everywhere in this room. I need to declare I use a fountain pen. I do look at the yellow pages. I actually read real books, not IT-based books. Yes, and I have a pet. I have a pet carrier pigeon. I write real cheques. Okay. Now, Maria, she said, "Don't you dare say anything about me." Of course, I won't. I will be paying for this when I go home in the car, but I am the driver. But Maria often makes a point of inviting me to go on to online banking. Maria Van Breda is my research assistant and admin assistant. Anyhow, thank you very much for that, and let's see what I can do. Heather also has given me some writing instructions. It's always good to get them about 20 seconds before you start. And that is, John, make it short and make it interesting and don't be a boring old fart, I think she said. So I've come prepared for a solid academic, conceptual engagement with you. And if you don't want to do this, I suggest you go and do something else right now. But anyhow, what I'm trying to do with you is to share a few thoughts. I don't know whether they'll come together coherently. I have actually written some stuff more coherently than I think what I'm going to say to you today, and I invite you to look at our website. I don't know whether it meets all the criteria of Sally's presentation, but it is there nevertheless. And of course, I think I should also say that Flinders is very delighted to have a presence and to have an engagement with this area of the state. Our VC, Professor Michael Barber, in one of his numerous, what he calls town square discussions with staff, emphasises community engagement and particularly with rural communities. And you may not know, but for example, we are one of the leaders, not only nationally but internationally, in rural medicine and the way in which GPs and allied health workers and others are prepared for rural communities. Okay, enough. I need to say very quickly that the chair I occupy at Flinders University is funded by the Sydney Myer Fund and Myer Foundation. They had a commemorative grants program of over $35 million. Long story short, competitive national bid process. And we did get to know our opposition before we finalised our bid. And we made the bid, and then through a process of selection and search and so on, I was invited and appointed the professor, which is for most times a sense of joy and a few times a sense of heartache. But anyhow, that's the way life is, and I'm delighted to be here. The framing of what I want to say to you today is encapsulated, or if you like, the framing for what I want to say is here really, that my considered view, and I think the view of many others, is in fact that productive vibrant rural communities are absolutely central to our national future, without doubt, and indeed the globe. This may sound as though it's going a bit against the trend, but let me try and convince you otherwise. In a sense, I'm speaking to converted because I kind of got the feeling you're all in something called rural. Now, we're not going to have a massive debate here, which we could do at another time, about what is rural, and many people would think that the Fleurieu is kind of quasi-rural, but for today it's rural. And the other thing I want to share with you, that I think the importance of rural communities is going to increase over the next 4 decades, not decrease. And one way of helping to get our heads around that, I think, is to think about the 20th century was about building the modern world, and I know that sounds excluding in terms of the developing world, so I've got to, I've been asked to keep it short, so I can't do a treatise or a thesis on this for you. But in summary, the 20th century is about building it. The 21st century is about sustaining it. And the driver behind that, which I'll elaborate a bit further on, is in fact population growth. So for Sally and you young ones at the end of the continuum who've got far more future than history, I've got way more history than future, I know that. And when I'm having a black dog time, I think to myself, I've got 15 years left. If I'm lucky, why am I spending the next 5 doing this? And the answer is, I actually don't know. But on a serious note, in my professional life, the world's population has doubled. And when Sally is my age, I'll reveal it later to you, Sally. Sorry for picking on you, but you're the only name I remember apart from Heather, and she's with me in terms of history-future balance. I know that. Sorry, Heather, we'll talk afterwards. And hug, make up. On a serious note, that by 2050, as you all know, it's going to be 9 to 10 billion. And that has massive implications. Not only that, but we've just passed the point where half the people's world now, where a bit over half now live in urban contexts. Whereas for most of the time that humanity has existed on the planet, it's been essentially in rural spaces and small communities. And as I said, I just come back from the UK, and it was a mixed bag for me, but one of the things that absolutely seared on my brain is the intensity of the settlement patterns. And wait for it, it's going to get more intense by about another third, and that has massive implications. So I guess the key messages are, I've dealt with the first one. The second one is that leadership is critically important for a whole range of reasons: charting new directions, making organisations work, human capacity building, nurturing potential, and so forth. And I apologise a bit because, as you've heard in the title, essentially my work is in education and communities, and most of you are in business. And I'm not a business person. I wouldn't know how to make $1 out of another dollar, I think. But bear with me. I think some of these things actually speak to your work. And the other point I make is, in fact, in line with that the 21st century has got to be, not only should it be, but I think it's got to be the century where we raise the profile and the significance of rural communities and the leadership within rural communities and the leadership for rural communities. And that is fundamentally important, and it's fundamentally important because they are, in essence, the crucible which provides that which nurtures and sustains life. There's quite a bit of literature around about, as people move into urban spaces, we'll have high-rise farms and so on. The best read I can get of it, that's not going to feed and nourish 9 to 10 billion people on the planet. We're going to have much more, or many more divergent solutions, but that won't, it seems to me, negate how important it is to have vibrant, productive rural communities. Some other things, and I know these are not allied to business, but the issue of access, the issue of affordability, the issue of appropriateness is critically important in rural areas. The importance of small businesses and clusters of small businesses. My one claim to business, if you like, I did write a submission to the state government on school bus transport. For the life of me, and I know this sounds a little political, but providing tenders to large companies outside of the state which can use, what's the correct word, vertical groupings and clusters of businesses to outbid a small business in a rural community, seems to me to be very short-sighted in terms of how critical we know small businesses with goodwill, good relationships, reliability, multiplier effect are for rural communities. And I speak to you as a former school bus driver, right? Carrying the bread bags and the mail and the spare parts when the shearing and the seeding was going on and so on. And in comes a large multinational or national company espousing the right words but having no sense of connection to space and place. It is also true on the left-hand side, as you all know, and we just heard it with fashion brands. I've never met anybody who's worked in the fashion industry, so thank you for coming here today. I do wear Bullrush shirts, R.M. Williams. Yeah, that's about it, I think. I can't even tell you. Oh, I know, Jockey, I think it is. Anyhow. No, it's not, it's Bonds, Chesty Bonds. But anyhow, in terms of globalisation, globalisation is manifesting itself in rural communities in very powerful and sometimes quite destructive ways. And what globalisation is doing, without wanting to make it the bad boy of all things or the bad, woman of all things, what it doesn't seem to me to do sufficiently is to understand something about the complexity of the contexts and what we need to understand, what we need to get our heads around if we're going to have vibrant, productive rural communities is how do we capitalise on the pluses of globalisation and try and shore up some of the stuff that is particularly toxic, including rationalisation of services and withdrawal of human services and aggregating those in larger population centres. That is not all bad. That the problem is, as Barry said before, what is the balance, between competition and collaboration, or words to that effect.